Welcome to 3 of Bobby's King's Indian attack games. In the first game we get Bobby against Ivkov, played in 66. Bobby starts off with e4, c5 the Sicilian, knight f3, e6 the French variation of the Sicilian defense. We get d3 and a knight c6. We get g3 from Bobby and then d5 from Ivkov, striking in the center. We get knight b to d2 is to avoid the queen trade. So for example, if we went back and we said it's a normal developing move, we get stakes and takes, and the queen's coming off the board, so it's not optimal for white. Going back, knight b to d2, bishop develops, Bobby does the same, and knight develops, preparing to castle. We get castles, and knight to h4. So here, opening up the f3 square for possible pawn push later on. We get b6 and then Bobby pushes the f pawn. We get takes, and bishop to a6, hitting the rook. Bobby slides the rook to e1 and then c4 from Ivkov, kind of blocking in his own bishop's way. Anyway, Bobby takes advantage of that with c3 and also taking away the forward squares of the knight. So a nice dual purpose move. Knight to the rim, Bobby hits the bishop. And we get check, king slides to the side and knight to the center of the board. We then get Bobby also improving his knight. And then bishop to b7, getting just onto a better diagonal. Then we get queen to h5. It's very typical in these setups to get the queen towards the king side and attack accordingly. We get knight going back in order to support. g4, so the pawns are rolling. Ivkov takes, but this is a blunder by taking the knight, and Stockfish wanted knight to h6 instead. Anyway, Bobby plays the best move, which is simply recapturing, threatening mate in 1. Ivkov defends with g6, and Bobby slides the queen to h6. Ivkov goes knight to d5, and then Bobby attempts to break open the king side with f5. And very important here for white is not to recapture, as it's forced mate as follows. So if we say we takes, and then forced mate in 1 again, so we get takes, so mate in 6. So yeah, this is just sad and losing. So just going back. So in the game we got the best move, which is a rook to e8, and Bobby takes, and oh no, my knight. Yeah, black cannot recapture the knight, otherwise we get takes, and just mate in 1, and mate as the pawn is controlling 2 important squares. So going back, we got the oh no, my knight, and then queen to d7, so just supporting the 7th rank. Knight going back already did his job. And then we get the rook to the center, knight going to h5, and in for a nice knight jump. Luckily also Ivkov's got a knight on one of those knight jumps, but he rather just moves his king out of the way to avoid the knight coming in with check. And Bobby goes in anyway with knight to f6, and we get takes, and a rook to g8, hitting the g4 pawn. We get bishop to f4, sacking the pawn, and Bobby allows the pawn capture because he's got a stone cold stunner move. Can you see it? Yes, rook a to d1. And what would you do in this position? Keeping in mind that the queen is also tied down to the mating square over there. So Ivkov plays a rook d to g8, and ladies and gentlemen, mate is just unavoidable, as it's mate in 6. And can you spot the best move for white? And no, it's not taking the queen, it's f7. Bobby found the best move, and Ivkov resigned in this position in order to maintain his dignity. Before we go into game 2, for those interested in the game, it could have continued as follows. So a rook going in to stop the mate threat. We've got check, a rook blocking the check. We get takes and check, a rook blocking, we get check, just capturing and just mate. So that's a nice one from Bobby. Let's go off to game 2, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. Okay, this is game 2, played in 67 against Ruben. And Bobby opened with, you guessed it, e4, c5, the Sicilian again, knight f3, e6, and d3, preparing to meet d5 with knight b to d2. So we get knight to c6 and g3, so pretty standard stuff. Knight g to e7, just developing, bishop to g2, g6, we get castles, and bishop to g7 is met with c3, also taking away forward squares for the knight, and we get d5. We get queen to e2, just developing, you get castles, and e5. Then we get f5 from Ruben, and you know that Bobby's always going to keep it open with e takes f. Bishop recaptures, and Bobby pushes the bishop all the way to h6. We get a rook to e8 and g4. e5 from Ruben, and then Bobby continues his kingside expansion with h3 and queen to c7. And Stockfish says this is a mistake, rather play something like g5 and lock in the bishop. Anyway, Bobby goes c4, hitting the pawn, and another mistake from Ruben with e4. And Bobby plays the best obvious move, which is simply just taking. And Ruben recaptures with the pawn, hitting the knight. Bobby then decides to plant the knight on g5. Ruben hits Bobby's queen with knight to d4, which is a nice outpost. And then Bobby then finally recaptures the undefended pawn. Ruben connects the rooks with bishop to d7, and we get knight c3 from Bobby, finally getting his knight into the game. Bishop to c6, hitting the queen. Queen drops back, so note the tension between the light squared bishops. We get takes and takes, and a rook a to d8, aligning with the queen. And Bobby brings the knight to the center, and just connecting his knights, and queen pinning the knight to the king. And here we get a rook f to e1. Here Bobby is bringing the rook to the center, supporting the pin piece, and king to h8 and a rook a to d1. So now both rooks are in the middle, and we get a blunder from Ruben. The intention is to hit the undefended bishop while opening a discovery on the queen. But Bobby saw all of this and plants his knight in the center on an outpost. And we get an inaccuracy from Ruben. Here the engine just wanted him to take the bishop. King drops back. Ruben attacks the bishop with a knight to g8 as well as supporting his bishop. And Bobby takes, and we get first get the intermediate. Rook takes on e1. Bobby recaptures, and then knight takes on f6. And now it's Bobby's turn to pin the knight with queen to c3. And already with two attackers, there's too much pressure on the f6 square. And ladies and gentlemen, Ruben resigned in this position just to keep his dignity, because you can already see on the bar it's plus 74 according to the bar. Let's say you bring the rook, and then it's just mate in 9, queen threatening mate on e8, supported by the rook. So then we get the rook going back, and then it's just queen to e7, hitting the rook and threatening mate. And if you go rook to g8, then simply takes with check. You get takes and takes, hitting the rook. Then it's just pure annihilation. So that's a beautiful mate. So let's go into game 3. So this is game 3, which Bobby plays against Uzi in 69. And we all know what Bobby started with. It's e4, e6, the French, d3, d5, and knight to d2. Signature move, we get c5, g3, preparing to fianchetto, knight f6, bishop to g2. So I'm just going to speed through this. It's all pretty standard stuff. Uzi continuing with development with knight to c6. And rook to e1, very common in the King's Indian attack, supporting the e5 push, queen to c7, and Bobby shoves the pawn in Uzi's territory. Knight going back, so now hitting the pawn 3 times and only defended twice. So Bobby adds a defender, so it's 3 on 3. b5, Uzi expanding on the queen side, h4 from Bobby, and a5, so a nice pawn formation that Uzi's got, but that's only temporary. We get knight to f1 from Bobby, and Uzi plays knight to d4, hitting the queen. So Bobby takes, Uzi recaptured and get double d pawns, and bishop supporting the e pawn in order to free up the other pieces. We get a rook lift from Uzi and knight rerouting through h2. A rook to c6, so pressuring the c pawn with 2 attackers, 1 defender. Bobby has a defender with a rook to c1, which makes it 2-on-2 again, so everything's fine. Get bishop to a6, and here Bobby finds a nice sacrifice and says, oh no, my bishop. Taking on e5, and the idea is also to win back a piece with a discovery on the queen. So Uzi takes the bishop, which is good for Bobby, and then Bobby says hi to the queen with e6, also hitting the knight as well as the queen. So queen drops back, and we get takes, and first delaying recapturing and hitting the queen, and then we get queen to g4, f5 hitting the queen, queen to h5, so close to the king. And you can see Bobby likes to bring the queen to the king side. Uzi then recaptures the pawn. Bobby plans to bring in his knight to join the attack, and we get h6 hitting the queen, and we all know what Bobby's going to do. Bobby's going to slide the queen into h6, which we saw in the previous game as well. Bishop to f6, and Bobby releases the tension with a rook takes on e6, queen takes, and Bobby plays this weird bishop to e5, which looks like it's just giving away a piece. We get Uzi taking, but now we get a rook to e1 in an attempt to win the piece back. f4 from Uzi. We get rook takes hitting the queen. Queen goes back, but now we get h5, trying to bust open black's king side. But Uzi first captures, hitting the knight. Bobby says you can go ahead and take my knight while I make you on this side. Uzi plays the intermediate, g takes on f2 check. King takes, pawn takes, queen takes with check, also hitting the bishop. So what is black going to do? You can't move the king because of just mate in 1. So we got queen blocking the check, and then Bobby brings in support from the rook, and Uzi just resigned in this position to maintain, his dignity. Anyway, this is what could have happened. So Bobby recapturing, and you'll just be down a piece in the end. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Please hit that subscribe button. See you guys in the next one.